I didn't wake up planning to call the sheriff. I woke up because metal screamed through the fog at 5:58 a.m., and my phone lit up with a live camera feed of my padlock coming apart like it was made of butter. 5 figures crowded my gate, boots planted on my dirt, and one step behind them, clean shoes on wet leaves, stood Brooke Caldwell, arms folded, smiling, like this was a ribbon, cutting ceremony instead of a crime scene. When the blue lights finally washed the trees, Brooke still looked convinced she was winning, because she truly believed an HOA seal could rewrite a property line. I didn't buy lakefront land to start a war. I bought it to get away from other people's committees. For most of my adult life, I worked corporate fraud investigations, quiet work, long hours, documents that looked legitimate until you learned how to read the seams. I learned early that the most dangerous lies don't sound angry. They sound official. When I finally walked away from that job, I wanted silence, pines, water, space where nobody could tell me what color my door should be or which path strangers were entitled to walk across my life. That's how I ended up with 3 acres on Greyhaven Lake in northern North Carolina. Foggy mornings, a rough little cabin, water so still it looked staged, and one detail that mattered more than anything else: the parcel sat just outside the boundary of the Lakeside Legacy HOA. Clean title, no recorded easements, no shared access, no fine print. That line on a county map meant everything to me. It meant nothing to people who had never been told no. The first week, it was subtle. A woman in a pastel jogging set walked her golden retriever straight past my porch like she was late for a meeting. 2 teenagers hauled inner tubes down my slope, laughing, not looking at me once. A man dragged a kayak across my clearing like he owned the trail. Nobody asked. Nobody hesitated. They moved through my yard the way people move through a hallway, confident, distracted, entitled. Week 1. I watched. Week 2. I spoke up. Private property. I told the kayak guy, "There's a public access point 2 streets over." He laughed, sharp and annoyed. "We've always gone this way," he said, and stepped around me like I was furniture. I didn't touch him. I just moved to the narrowest part of the path and stood there. "Not anymore," I said, calm enough to make him angrier. He turned back uphill, muttering about newcomers, like I was the one taking something. By week 3, I rebuilt the collapsed fence line on the actual boundary. New cedar posts, steel gate where the trail hit my line, motion cameras tucked into birdhouse casings. Because I've learned a basic truth: records matter more than arguments. 2 mornings later, an embossed folder slid under my gate. Lakeside Legacy Homeowners Association. It claimed I'd obstructed traditional community access and demanded I remove the gate within 7 days. Signed by Brooke Caldwell, HOA President. Co-out, signed by Trent Hale, Community Legal Affairs. Brooke didn't introduce herself. She issued a deadline. I answered with 1 page. County, verified parcel map, certified title, land office confirmation, no easements, no servitudes, no shared access clauses. 1 line in bold: use by habit does not create legal right. Future communication through counsel. I delivered it to their clubhouse that night so nobody could pretend it was lost. For 3 days, it went quiet. The kind of quiet that feels staged, like a breath held before a shove. On Thursday, a black SUV with tinted windows rolled up to my boundary. 3 people stepped out in office clothes that didn't belong in the woods. The man in the middle introduced himself as representing Lakeside's legal counsel and handed me an envelope tied with red string. Inside was a limited servitude agreement dated 2 years earlier. claiming the previous owner had granted lakeside residents permanent passage across my land. I read the signature, then the notary stamp. Then I looked up. "You're aware Russell Keyes died in January of that year, right?" I asked. "The document predates his death," the man said, too quickly. I flipped to the notary page. February 27th. The woman in heels shifted. The youngest guy swallowed hard. I pulled up the notary registry on my phone. License revoked years ago for falsifying affidavits. I held the screen toward them. "This is a forgery," I said. "And you just handed it to me on camera." The man tried to smile. "Mr. Grant, we'd like to avoid escalation. We have an understanding already." "No," I said. "You don't. Stay off my land." That night, burner numbers started texting. Photos of my gate. Messages about the community not backing down. Brooke didn't threaten like a thug. She threatened like a chairwoman, vague, moral, and confident that pressure would do what law couldn't. 2 days later, she went public. A Lakeside newsletter appeared in my mailbox, though I wasn't in their HOA, featuring my gate and Brooke's quote about protecting Grey Haven's legacy from hostile outsiders. A flyer went up at the hardware store. Town Hall. Save Grey Haven access. I went because Brooke wanted witnesses. She stood at the front of the room in pearls and a pastel blazer, smiling like a local politician. She pointed at a projected photo of my gate. "This is what happens," she said, "when someone decides they can rewrite decades of tradition." I stood up. "I'm not in your HOA," I said evenly. "My property is outside your boundary. There's no easement. I asked people to stop crossing my land." Brooke tilted her head toward the room. "So you admit you're blocking families," she said, letting the crowd apply the pressure for her. That night, for the first time, I felt tired in a way cameras couldn't fix. I sat alone in the cabin, listening to the lake, and wondered if I was wrong. Not legally. I knew I wasn't wrong legally, but emotionally. I wondered if peace was worth more than being right. If letting strangers cross my land would be easier than standing alone against 100 neighbors who believed tradition was the same thing as ownership. There was a moment, sitting at my table with the lights off, where I seriously considered unlocking the gate and walking away from the fight. I'd moved here for quiet, and all I'd done was invite noise. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I should just let it go. What stopped me wasn't anger, it was something colder. If I gave in now, I wasn't choosing peace. I was teaching them that pressure works. And people who learn that lesson don't stop. So I built a file. Every newsletter, every flyer, every text, every video clip backed up in 3 places. I sent high-resolution scans of the servitude document to a forensic examiner named Nolan Pierce, and I hired a property attorney, Aaron Shaw, who didn't waste time on outrage. "We'll get a restraining order," she said, "and we'll make them prove what they're claiming." Brooke's next move was the one she thought would make everything inevitable: force a new reality into place before the process could stop her. That's the morning the grinder woke me. 5 figures froze when they heard my boots on the gravel. 1 held the grinder. The chain was already cut. 2 wore matching windbreakers that read, "Lakeside Safety." 1 hammered stakes into my ground, rolling out orange mesh fencing like he was building a corridor. And behind them stood Brooke, holding a sheet stamped with the HOA seal. "Morning," I said. Clipboard guy found his voice first. "Sir, this is a temporary community access restoration sanctioned by the HOA. "No," I said calmly, "it's trespassing." Brooke stepped forward, chin high. "Emergency board resolution," she announced. The board voted unanimously. I looked at her paper. "That's not a court order," I said. "It's stationary." "You threatened our representatives," she said. "We're documenting this." "Good," I said. "So are my cameras." I called the sheriff. When Deputy Ramirez arrived, Brooke rushed toward him. "Thank God," she said. "He's obstructing community access and threatening volunteers." Ramirez walked past her and came straight to me. "Mr. Grant?" He nodded. "Show me." I handed him my deed, the county map, the footage of the grinder cutting my lock. He looked at the orange mesh, then at Brooke's resolution. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "HOA policies don't apply on property outside your jurisdiction. Remove your crew, now," one of the safety guys muttered. "I'm not getting arrested for this," and started rolling up the mesh. The grinder guy wouldn't meet my eyes. Clipboard guy dropped his clipboard. Brooke stood rigid, watching her authority evaporate in the wet morning air. 5 days later, Lakeside served me with a civil complaint. Obstruction of traditional access. Emotional distress. A demand the court force an easement. Aaron answered with a counterclaim. Harassment. Interference with property rights. Attempted fraud. Attaching Nolan's report and the deputy's incident log. That's when Lakeside started cracking from the inside. A board member named Mark Ellis contacted Aaron from a blocked number. We met at a diner under fluorescent lights. Mark slid a USB across the table and didn't touch his coffee. "Brooke keeps templates," he whispered. "She calls dead owners easy. She told us to backdate. I can't carry it anymore." At the hearing, Brooke arrived in pearls again, smiling like she'd already written the ending. Her lawyer talked about tradition. Aaron showed evidence. The unedited footage, the forged document analysis, the email threads with metadata intact. Brooke's words sat in plain text on a screen, backdated before the death certificate. Nobody checks. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Caldwell," he said calmly, "do you understand what this suggests?" Her smile held for one long second, then failed. "I'm granting the order," the judge said, "and I'm referring this matter to the county prosecutor." Brooke gathered her binder like it could still protect her. In the hallway, people who'd nodded along at her town hall suddenly avoided her eyes. I drove back to Grey Haven without music, replaced the chain, checked the cameras. The fog rolled in and softened the fence line, but the boundary didn't move. I took one sip of black coffee and let the silence do what speeches never can. Power only works when people believe in it. And the moment you stop believing, it collapses.